So, good evening to all, and a quick welcome to Professor Kiran from University of South Florida. I think he will introduce himself. But before that, let me introduce, like every time, my name is Milind Kamath. I'm from SPJIMR, uh, from Information Management and Analytics Department. I also head the GMP program. And like every 15 days, we have interesting conversation on the evolving field of generative AI. Today have the today's webinar is sponsored by University of South Florida. We have interesting panelist on the today's webinar. He is also earlier worked in corporate. So Kiran, I would like first to introduce, because you are also driving some narratives in the ecosystem there. So your background first, and then I will take the conversation further. What areas you are working on this part, and of course your other field or blockchain. So sometimes I can also have you on other seminars.
Certainly. Thank you so much for welcoming me to this one. I always enjoy these conversations. So my name is Kiran, and I happen to have a PhD in artificial intelligence and machine learning. I actually started working on AI, writing expert systems back in the mid 80s, believe it or not. So when I tell this to younger people today, they're surprised. They said, "Oh, there were computers in those days." Well, yes, there were computers in those days. Not only computers, but we actually had AI in those days, which is really funny, right? So I went to school at the University of Florida, so up here in Gainesville. And over the years, I've migrated towards the corporate side. My background, besides just a research, is as a software engineer. So I've learned, a whole slew of all kinds of programming languages, from Fortran, COBOL, Pascal, Prolog, where I did my most of my research in C, C++, Java, etc., etc. So I've experienced, many of those. I'm not an expert in any of those. That's not my cup of tea right now. But over the last 20 years or so, 2 decades, I've been more in the executive management, first as a global CIO for one of the General Electric companies. And after that, with the Software AG, a German company, as a chief evangelist and vice president for business process management. I've written 3 books, 2 on process management and 1 on AI and machine learning. Over the last few years, I've been persuaded by my friends in academia to share my experience in corporate world with the university students, and also help with some of the interesting applied research that happens in this area. So currently I'm a visiting assistant professor of instruction at University of South Florida's Muma College of Business in the School of Information Systems and Management. I teach graduate courses in data analytics, which is machine learning, data analytics for business. It's very business focused types of things that I teach. I also teach a fintech and blockchain. I co-founded a company called Core Chain several years ago, and it is in the space of private capital markets, creating permission blockchain solutions for the world's private capital markets. And it's a pretty fascinating one. We built the world's largest permission chain launched in 23 different countries with a capacity to process 10 billion transactions per year. So that's a pretty interesting thing that's going on. So I hold a chief as a consulting chief scientist role within that company. So that's my short introduction.
Very impressive, and thank you for joining us today. So quickly, you also mentioned to me you are also working on generative AI, ChatGPT. You are also leading some forums. So can you give some audiences, our audiences, some insight on that part? And before on that, you can put the links of your books also in the chat box, so that we can also and our audiences can also benefit. Okay.
Excellent. All right, very good. So over the generative AI, so ever since ChatGPT came out, I mean, everyone should probably realize that what we call the ChatGPT type of technologies and behind the scenes, the large language models, the natural language, understanding NLU types of technologies, they have been around for many, many years. In fact, some of them decades, right? They're not new. But what's changed recently is the enormous processing power that's required to create these large language models, right? And that's been sort of the game changer in this area. Plus, a few other interesting innovations. Attention is all you need, and those kinds of new types of algorithms and how they do it. So ever since this came out, obviously, I've been very interested in this. What I've been playing with this ever since it, several months, more than a year now, kind of following this entire story. I've used this extensively, both for programming myself, for my research, and just casually looking at various things. So I've been invited to speak to the board of advisors at the MoMA College, and I made this and other presentations. There was another conference called the Academia Meets Practice, the AMP conference up here in Florida. And the intent there is to bring academics or practice research to the senior level leadership in many companies here. So I've been playing with this stuff, and I'm looking for ways to incorporate this into my own, teaching sessions as well. And on that note, there's one interesting thing I need to mention to you all. In this advisors meeting, the board of advisors. So I was showing this demo and doing all this stuff, and there was one comment right at the very end. I was asking for questions, and one of the board members said, "There's something that I've heard this similar topics spoken by other people, but there's something significant missing from your presentation." And I said, "Whoa, what can it be? Usually I pride myself on being fairly thorough." And he said, "No, there's something really missing in your presentation." And he said, "You know what that is? That is, you have shown no fear." And I said, "Yes, because I am not afraid. I'm concerned, but I'm not afraid." So that's a distinction. So hopefully we'll have a interesting discussion about this as we, get into it.
So before we move forward, for all the participants, these sessions we do a lot of interaction. You can see in chat box, so there are questions which I will start doing after 15 minutes. Some interesting things professor will show you, and then I will start interacting on the other half with respect to question. But Professor Kiran, just one question before you do, because you are expert and layman's term, can you explain to our participants that attention you need is that they change the whole world of this generative AI. So can you take 2 minutes and explain to our people in a very layman's word what is that change? Because you use that word and it is very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. All of the so-called chat GPT, the underlying technology behind chat GPT is the transformer technology and the large language models. And the basic idea is intuitively very simple. When you take a whole bunch of different text and you analyze for patterns within the text and you encode all of that and you store it as a vectorized large knowledge base somewhere, right? You detect certain patterns in not only language but also in knowledge, right? So for example, if I say it's raining cats, and people will complete and say dogs, because cats and dogs is a well-known paradigm in for English speaking people, right? In sciences also, suppose I started a sentence and said correlation does not imply, almost
Correction.
everyone will say causation.
Correct.
Right? Why? Because we have learned. So there are many of these patterns that we learn by just by reading a lot of books and interactions, right? So a lot of the language that we learn has nothing to do with learning the rules of grammar. It has to do with learning patterns in what we're doing. So that is the paradigm behind it one. So when we talk about attention and self-attention, it is a way, it's a very formal and very rather complicated to explain to lay people. But the idea is this one: do you pay attention to the sequence of the words in the stuff that you read? And the longer the sequence is, and you're able to retain this in memory and draw patterns from it, the more powerful will be your language capabilities and reasoning capabilities, right? If you look at kids, for example, you have to talk in short sentences. You cannot speak long sentences. It has to be very short. If you speak long, you will lose their attention. But once you start speaking with graduate students, you can string together a very long sentence that goes on for many, many lines, so to speak, and without pausing, you can articulate many complex ideas without referencing earlier ideas. You see how I made up a long sentence right there?
Correct.
But you can all follow it, right? And so this whole concept of attention and self-attention in learning all this is codified in a bunch of algorithms that are going to be used. This coupled with the enormous availability of computational power at a relatively cheap cost nowadays, and access to enormous amount of digital books and articles and knowledge and all this stuff, has created this. It's sort of a breakthrough point, tipping point. Right? It's like a singularity, right? It's like a singularity. It's just broken out and said, "Whoa! Here is light, and here's some really interesting things happening."
Okay, thank you. So today's topic, we want to have a conversation with you because based on my conversation here in Indian ecosystem, ever since OpenAI announced code interpreter, there are lots of conversation. And one extreme of that conversation, perhaps programming will become obsolete because code interpreter obviously has shown Python code getting
Yeah.
generated. Other extreme where people will have a saying there is a lot of junk code. If you try to go sometimes based on the way prompts are given, a lot of junk is coming out. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
these people say that nothing will work. It is a hype, perhaps, we will die its own natural death. And in between, there are people who are likely to say, saying that it is a productivity improvement too. And
Yeah.
it is a question is how do you like other tools emerge in last, many years. This is one tool which you have to look not as automation and replacement, but it is augmentation. Okay. So before you start on your insights on ChatGPT, I want to you have your expert view on these narratives and what perhaps reality what will happen. So as a guidance, because I'm future is uncertain, but that is one, and then we will take the areas of ChatGPT.
Certainly. I want to give a analogy here that will help everyone get a little bit grounded on not just ChatGPT, but technology improvements in general, right? So when motorized vehicles came up first, they were able to travel faster than humans can run. Okay. Now, how do humans cope with a technology like that? Would they say, oh no one should be able to run faster than human beings, right? Let's ban this technology because humans are superior. We run at 20 miles per hour and that's it, right? So instead of doing that, what we have done is that we have used motorized vehicles to carry loads and transport at very fast speeds. However, have we stopped running races? No, we still do this, right? So nobody today runs at, you don't look at a champion, right, who has won a Olympic gold medal for running and then say, well, big deal, my car can go faster than you can run. We don't say that. We admire people for what they achieve. Similarly, I think in this type of technology also, um, how much we use this technology as a tool is going to change the way we interact with the tool and with the environment. So you can start at different points in time. You can say, I do not know programming at all. Do I need to learn programming? Well, it depends. I'll give you some interesting thoughts about that, my perspective on that one as we go into this one, because I want to show you how this might actually work. But if you are well into programming, you can use the very same tools in a different way. Okay, it is like when you learn to drive, you can drive a little car and go to the market, and get groceries and stuff like that one. But you can also upgrade your skill to drive a Ferrari at very, very high speeds and win the Indy and the NASCAR races. Same driving skill, but different purpose and different levels of that skill is there, right? So I think it's a spectrum, and I don't want people to feel afraid of any of these technologies.
Okay. So with that, I am told that you have some interesting demo or ideas. If OpenAI is working, perhaps 10-15 minutes, you can show our audiences those things, what will happen in programming. And then we can take the Q&A from there because there are some questions already in, some will start taking. So it is all yours for
Yeah.
next 10 minutes, how you want to drive.
Oh, Okay, very good. So I want to just show a few snippets of how you can start using. Now, this is only one use case. People have used ChatGPT to do travel planning, to write little articles and fiction and all kinds of different things, right? But for the purpose of this audience and here, um, I just want to focus on someone who says, hey, I want to learn data analytics and I want to use it, yeah, I want to learn it in the context of R programming. Whether you say, I want to learn data analysis using R, or I want to learn R programming and apply to data analytics, it's a very similar idea, right? Just slightly different nuances. So, what I want to do is I want to bring up ChatGPT and I'll show you some really interesting dynamics of how this happens. We can have a number of different sessions on this, by the way, because each time you will see different aspects of how to use ChatGPT for your own education. So let me go ahead and share my screen if I may. And just give me a second. Um, okay. Please let me know if you are able to see my screen that has an R Studio on one side and ChatGPT on the other side.
Yes, we are able to see.
Okay, terrific. So I have my ChatGPT session up here. The 3.5 version is the free version, and the 4 version, which I have signed up for, it's a paid version. It's not very expensive, but it's up there. So this is a more advanced version, and it can do some advanced reasoning. I want to show you the version 4 because that's the cutting edge. I want to show you what the cutting edge really means. So what I would like to do is I want to just start with a little message here. I want to start the dialogue with ChatGPT. So let's take this persona and let's start with this. Okay. So assume that you know nothing about R programming or about much about data analytics, besides simply having a rough idea that data analytics means you take a bunch of data and you analyze it, right? And that's it. Let's just assume that. So let's use ChatGPT to learn how to do analysis, data analytics in R. So I'm going to ask ChatGPT about it. Okay. So how do we actually start? Let's see if ChatGPT is responsive. Oh, it's actually typing. So it's anticipated what I want to ask, and it's saying, okay, here is what you do. So it gives you a step-by-step method by which you can accomplish your goal. And what I want you to focus on, everyone, when you're looking at this, see the tone of the dialogue and how human friendly or user friendly it is. You can almost assume that on the other side of the fence you actually have a human being, right? It's that good, and it's getting really better as we go forward. So it tells you what to do in the beginning, and as you can see, I've already done it. I have my R Studio and R up here. I've done all this stuff, and now it is showing you a bunch of different things that you can actually do. Okay. So it tells you specific things that you can do. And so what I'm going to do is um, I'm going to ask it to, let us start with a simple data set. Okay. And let us see what it's going to come up with. One of the things you have to realize is all of this ChatGPT is like a SaaS product. It's up there in the cloud. And I think these webinar organizers have done a fantastic job of inviting so many people. They're all going on ChatGPT, so it's causing a bit of a slowdown. Okay, but that's fine. So let's go ahead and take a look at what it is trying to do right now. So it sort of said, okay, fine. We'll start with a very simple data set. Let's work with a simple data set. We will create age, height, and weight for individuals. Here's how you would create the data set directly within R. So this is good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the code, put it in my R console, and I'm going to select all of it and I'm going to hit run. And there it is. So it is showing me my data, right? It's printing all of my data. That's what it's done. And this will display, that's exactly what it has done. And the second step is to perform what is called some summary statistics, right? Now, remember, you are not a daily R programmer, so you may not remember you won't know all the syntax. And even though I use R quite heavily, I've found using tools like this one, they cut down on my coding time unbelievably. I use R for research, and it really helps me a whole lot, right? But I'll show you some interesting things. So let's say I copy this code, put it up in my R console, and I'm going to put it here, and this is how R works. You have to select the whole line and run it, and it gives you the summary statistics. Okay, so there it is. So, and now you can study the structure of data. Okay, and it's giving you the code pretty handy. So as you are going through this interaction, you're doing two things at one time. You're learning how R works, the basic syntax, but you're also learning analytics, right? You're saying, okay, I just want to see what this is all about. So it tells you here, for example, that age and height and weight are all numeric fields. Okay, that's an example. Then it gives you many other interesting ideas. Let's add a column called body mass index to the data. And let's perform some statistical analysis with that one. And you'll say, fine, let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so I'm going to copy all of this or select all of it and then go ahead and do this. And it's done what it's supposed to do. And now let's find out if age is correlated with BMI. And you'll say, fine, let me go ahead and look at this. I am going to copy and paste this, and let's run this. And it says correlation between age and BMI is a negative 0.9999. At this point, you may stop and say, what is correlation? Okay, let's ask it that, because you're also trying to learn some level of statistics and data analytics, right? So now it is telling you that correlation is a statistical measure. It is telling you the range of the values between 0 and 1, the negative correlation, what that means, what is a zero correlation, and different methods of calculating correlation, right? And it is showing you all that. And so let it complete here in a couple of seconds. It will take care of that. Um, there it is. Well, that's a very frightening looking mathematical formula, which you most likely will never have to deal with, which is the good news. And it is telling you all this important thing. And it says, would you like to know more about how to calculate or interpret correlation in the context of R or in general? But I do want to understand one thing. Which correlation method did you use? Okay. And I'm hoping that it says it's the Pearson correlation, but let's see how it interprets that. In the R example I provided earlier, I used the core function, which is a Pearson's correlation coefficient. What you can see is very interesting. ChatGPT remembers the earlier dialogue, right? I gave it very little context. I said, what correlation method do you use? And it knows the specific context in which I'm asking this particular question, right? And it is giving you a lot more detail about what all of that means and how you can use the method parameter here to change any of these values, right? Method is Pearson versus Spearman versus Kendall, okay? Now, you can go off down that little rabbit hole and say, hey, explain more about Spearman or more about Kendall. And you can keep going on and on with that. Would you like to dive deeper into any of these methods, right? And of course you can. And let me warn you, if you use it the way I'm showing you how to use it, it can become very addictive. If you're a learner, you will go down this path and you can spend hours diving into all kinds of details, and it is absolutely fascinating. You can learn a lot from all of this stuff. Okay. I do have some important caveats as we kind of go forward, but let's go back to this one and take a look at any of these things, right? So we already went through the correlation between age and BMI right here. And now let's look at some visualizations, because those are always cool, right? So let's see how it tells you, how it shows you what the visualizations might be. And here is the age and the BMI, and it is showing you the age versus the BMI plot. That's a quick walkthrough with a simple data set. You can follow similar steps for more complex data sets. Would you like to explore more? And of course, you can go on and on and on. But you can now go back to that age versus BMI. In the age versus BMI plot, please interpret that for me. And you're going to ask it and say, how do I actually read this stuff? It says, certainly. In the example or code, this is what it's doing. And upward sloping line means something, and the downward sloping line means something, and it's explaining to you what all of these things actually mean, right? And the scatter points and so on. Okay, so it's also telling you what the correlation coefficient is and how to interpret that in the context of all this. So now you can see how you're not only learning R, but you're learning the techniques of analytics, but you're also looking at the basis for some of those techniques and analytics, which is statistical things, and you're asking questions and you're just diving deeper and deeper into this one. Okay, so let me pause here for a second and see if this all of this is kind of making sense, or if there are any questions.
No, one of the things I think on behalf of the participants, I want to know how the skill, which suppose perhaps I'm an engineering graduate and today in engineering schools, one way or the other, they have a programming course the way you are mentioning. What way the skills will get changed in those degree programs? Is it the way you are saying learning has to be done, or the classic learning that people start from the scan, understand the programming constructs, start learning programming? Because you have shown a different path of learning as compared
Yes.
to the learning which happens in traditional classrooms. Perhaps your views on that point, and then we'll take that thing forward.
Yeah, no, certainly. So, just let's focus on engineering. No, I'm not an engineer, so I cannot speak authoritatively about
No,
engineering.
no,
But
any
let's,
graduate
yeah,
school where data science
yeah,
is taught, it's a
yeah,
classical programming pathway. Uh,
yeah.
Understanding programming, then of course you dive into data science related statistical techniques and then
Sure.
constructing programming. But the way you have said today, it's a much different pathway than the traditional pathway exists in the classrooms.
Exactly. Exactly. So let me give everybody an analogy to help you understand how this might actually work. So if you were to learn a new human language, let's say German or Spanish or French or something else, or a different Indian language, right? You can take one of two paths. Number one, you can start learning the alphabet, then the rules of grammar, then the rules of sentence construction, and go on. Let me tell you, I mean, I've been around the world like 20 different countries, and I speak 5 languages. That approach is probably one of the worst ways you can try to learn a language. The other one is just start speaking, right? And do the hello world approach and have a conversation, have a dialogue, forget grammar, all these different rules, right? Now, think about the most fluent language that you know. Maybe it's your native language, maybe it's English. For me, let's say it's English, right? If I learn the rules of grammar, I have to learn what a noun prepositional clause is. I have no idea what it is. I've written 3 books. If you ask me what a propositional clause is, I have absolutely no idea, but I use it, right? So the usage and the conversation is more important. Let's bring this back to programming. The traditional method of learning data analytics is as follows. You need to learn some mathematical techniques, linear algebra. Next, you need to have a parallel course in learning programming, Python or R. Then you need to have a statistics course. Then you need to have a data analytics, machine learning type of course, right? Take programming. You start with the syntax. Then you write a little hello world. Then people teach you about, what are functions, right? What you saw here has nothing to do with that one. We just dove right in, okay? And we dove right in. So once you learn a programming language in the traditional method, by the time you come to data analysis, you've kind of forgotten some of that, right? And now you have to revisit all this stuff up, right? And instead of doing that, you learn programming in the context of data analytics, but don't mess with, don't worry so much about all the actual syntax, having to type all this up in excruciatingly painful way and learn all this different syntax. What is a dollar sign? What is this? What does that mean? Instead of that, experiment with it. Like let ChatGPT or some tool like that tell you in the context of where you are and do it, right? Once you do that, you start getting an idea. If you wanted to learn programming, then you pay attention to this and say, oh, my data is my data set. Height is a variable. Height underscore m is a variable. The dollar sign means, and you can ask ChatGPT and say, what does a dollar sign mean in your variable name? And it'll tell you what it means, right? So I can show that to you real quick. Oops, um, what does the dollar sign in R mean? Okay. And it's going to tell you what it means because you never knew it is used to access a specific column or a variable in redirect frame. And that's exactly what it is, right? See, bam, you learned it in the context, right? And you now remember that one. And now you continue on and you learn all these things. As time goes by, do you ever have to necessarily memorize and say what is how does correlation work, the core function? If you remember, if you do it many times, you will remember it whether you like it or not. You'll memorize it. But if I don't do this all the time, I can ask the chat gpt. It'll tell me what it is, right? Some of these plots can get pretty intricate. All these plots and the parameters within them can get very intricate. I can't remember all that stuff. I'm going to put it up in a different ways, right? How do I change the color of that line to red? How do I do that? You can ask ChatGPT and tell you how it does it, right? That is the change in the paradigm of how we have to learn, if that helps.
So, Kiran, before I take the questions, do you have anything else, or otherwise I have a follow-on question on this, what we have given the learning path? Because in
Yes.
programming, because I'm also in the software field for many years, and we shifted from waterfall to agile for the software
Yep.
development. Now, looking at what you described today, we have agile learning. What you need, you learn. You don't have to go from those steps. So you have a
Yes.
new paradigm called agile learning with ChatGPT now, actually. Because
Exactly.
what you can learn what you need right now. You don't have to
Yeah.
go for the whole course, right?
Yeah. So there is a concept in production manufacturing, right, called just in
Correct.
time inventory, right? This is like that, just in time learning. You learn when you have to use it, it'll stick with you. Right? So you're 100% right. So many years ago, when I was actually in Hyderabad going through my the very first MCA from Central University there, we were attending all these interesting, seminars, all physically. Of course, there was no internet in those days. I still remember a speaker. I forget which university from US he came from, but he was doing. This is like not a general open to the public, but it's within the university seminars, right? And this person came in and he said the goal of AI in those days, AI was like really hot. He said the goal of AI, for example, he said is don't execute what I type, execute what I mean. In other words, when I write my code, don't look at what I type in my code, but try to figure out what I mean and use that to actually write the program or
Right,
execute the
right,
program, right? And that is such a far out concept. It's unbelievable that after 30 years, we're slowly getting to that stage right now,
right.
you know?
Okay, what I want to do with your permission, should I start taking questions? Because we have a lot of questions, more than 10, 12 questions. With your permission, should I
Absolutely.
start taking our participants' questions?
I think that is better because otherwise I'll go on for next 2 hours for this thing.
Yes. So the first is from Nitish Gupta, and those are whose questions I'm taking. If you feel that there is a follow-on question, put it on the chat. I will try to moderate or club some questions. So from Nitish Gupta, how to cope up with Chat GPT, decreasing efficiency of employee or student and demotivating the person who actually performs. Perhaps he has touched a very important point because there is a merit versus now this assistant will also try to equalize the talent. So your views, please.
Excellent, very good. So my view is the following. Remember, my general viewpoint, my philosophical, stance is you should never be afraid of technology, right? The moment you're afraid of technology, you're finished. So instead, you have to figure out what can I do to get ahead of this and drive it better, right? Just because a car came up, you're not going to be threatened by the fact that the car can go faster. And you get in there, learn the car, and drive faster, right? That's what you can do. So in this particular case, I do not know the premise of ChatGPT decreasing efficiency of the employee. I'll tell you, my programmers today in my co-founded company, they use ChatGPT and Copilot and all this, regularly. Their productivity has increased, right, tremendously. I use ChatGPT to write very complicated R programs for different types of new ways of applying machine learning algorithms for business problems, and I use R programming. If I had to write the R program from scratch, it would take me hours, right? Because I'm not a world-class coder, it's not my cup of tea. That's not how I make my living. But I want to use it, right? ChatGPT cuts it down to 5 minutes, 10 minutes max. I'm not kidding you. If I show you my R Studio, all the other programs I've written on this one, they're very complicated. Much of that has been written very interactively with ChatGPT, right? So rather than demotivating me, it has actually made me more productive. One of the biggest problems with programming, by the way, to those of you who want programming, the biggest headache in any programming is learning the syntax and the structure of the language. And you actually want to get to the actual fun part, but before you get there, you have to worry about, you do C programming, you have to worry about malloc and tloc and all this memory management techniques and pointers and all this other crappy stuff. And you said, oh, what's going on with all this stuff? I want to write some cool programs. That's what the issue is. So you take something like ChatGPT. I am absolutely motivated now to even write even more programs, right? So that's kind of my view.
Okay, so that is Nitish. I think you got the answer. Lena is asking how inequitable access of disruptive technology is going to shape the geopolitics. Of course, it's a very involved part. So I want a very short answer from you.
Yeah, I know. We'll be here for hours talking. But here's
Yes.
the long and short of it. Here's the long and short of it. Like ChatGPT, you have free versions. You have many other such technologies, Claude and many others, Bloom. They're all free versions are out there. Are they as good as ChatGPT? Maybe not. But it's getting there. I'll tell you something. There are more than 3,000 to 4,000 algorithms in the data analytics field. Every one of them is freely available in the open source. You never have to buy any of this stuff. R is free. Python is free. Julia is free. Haskell is free. All these things are free, right? So the technologies are getting so free and so openly available that I'm not entirely sure if the access to them is inequitable in any major sense. Is there inequitable access to bandwidth and internet? Yes, many areas, I'm sure. But that's always been there, right? ChatGPT and AI did not change that. It's happened in telecommunications, it happened in banking, it's worldwide spread, right? So there's a lot of interesting things going on. The role of AI in making supply chains. Oh boy. I mean, there's a ton of stuff we can talk about in supply chain management with AI and blockchain and all of this one. But that is sort of my real quick short answer to that one, if it helps.
Tina, just to tell you, there is a GPT for all. It runs on a desktop with more than 12 large language models you can experiment on. So let me go to Prasanjit. How much does chat got? How much does chat got and AI will affect in coming years and in the respective jobs? I think it is answered, but perhaps a short answer from you.
No, it's a no, 100%. There is going to be a tremendous impact of AI technologies and ChatGPT. If if you aren't understanding that now, you are going to go the way of the dinosaur, right? You have to get on top of this. You have to learn it. There is no other way. But the plus of this one is no, that need not be scary, because the positive side is it's actually very exciting, right? It actually is really interesting and challenging.
Okay. I'm also a question from Bindi Vivek Reddy. I'm an engineering graduate and I want to know how generative AI would bring the change in the business world. You have
Excellent.
mentioned
Yeah,
one, but she's talking about business world.
yeah. No, definitely. So what I'm looking at is allowing general business people, which many of you are, you may not be in engineering or programming, allowing many non-technical people to use the power of these technologies to perform their own analysis. I did not need to know anything about R. All I had to do there was, as you saw in my demo, type some simple natural language requests, and it's able to show me the code and do this stuff, right? So I could have done this analysis by myself. The only thing is, you have to get over the fear of being able to use these technologies. There is a little bit of an engineering headache in using these technologies, and that is to set up an environment such as R. That's a little bit slightly technical, right? But once you get past that, okay, I think you're off to the races. I think it's going to change a whole lot. Because I'm in the, let me expand on this in 1 second, because it's a very important question you asked. Um, in the business school, we come across a lot of really interesting techniques and tools from what I call the formal computer science and mathematics departments, right? You got things like topological data analysis, you have large language models, you have neural networks with all kinds of, deep learning, stuff that comes up. And they're very, very technical, right? And engineering, by the way, oh, Kalman filters are there in engineering, right? So I almost attended a lecture by Professor Rudolf Kalman. But could you take Kalman filters and apply them in an engineering context? They're fantastic. They're widely used. But could you take that and use it for business? Is one of my areas of research, right? You can see now how you can use ChatGPT to say, what is a Kalman filter? What is the algorithm for that? How can I use it? Can I take a simple business data set and kind of use it? So you can explore these things in a much more flexible way than ever before.
Okay, I have a next question which is interesting, and I have a follow-on one other sub-question in that. This is from Aditya Bhargava. I'm currently working as a ML application engineer. What do you think about future of work would look like? That is a question he has. So you can answer that first. And with respect to this ML and engineering, I want your expert opinion that ChatGPT and large language model in general are capable of generating synthetic data. And
Okay,
synthetic
sure.
data in the context of academic research, whether it can become one of the sources of triangulation for validity, and in general in machine learning testing models. So this is a follow-on to what he has asked. Go ahead.
Okay. Oh boy. Okay. So the first question: what does the life look like when you have extensive, these technologies become more ubiquitous, right? So what life looks like for every one of us is that, just like today, we learned how to type instead of hunting and pecking. We learned how to type. It makes us very, very productive. We will put Chat GPT and such like models out there in front of a desktop. Google, for example, take Google search. No one today can get without doing Google today. They have to search on Google, right? Over the last several months, I have actually stopped going to Google. I go to ChatGPT. Because most of the times I'm not worried about the latest stuff. If I have to go to the latest stuff, then I go to Google, because ChatGPT's knowledge is cut off at November 21st, 2021, I think,
21.
right? Something like that. Yeah, exactly. So now they will do, there are plugins where you can actually go on the internet. There's a Scholar AI. There's all sorts of plugins there that will do real-time stuff right now. But generally speaking, I don't go to Google anymore to ask questions about if I want to learn something new, because what Google does is gives you a bunch of Stack Exchange and Math Exchange and this and that and all that. Then you have to go through all the different opinions and sift out and all this garbage, right? This gives you, the goods directly. Okay, so that is how it's going to change. Every one of us is going to have a Chat GPT, just like we have Google today. It's going to become our crutch, our friend, our confidant, and our assistant. It's going to become that. Okay. The next part of the question is about. Sorry, if you
Synthetic
don't
data.
mind, can you repeat? Oh,
Synthetic
the
data.
synthetic data. So ChatGPT, surprisingly, is actually very, very good with being able to generate synthetic data, but with the following caveats. I'm going to give you a simple example here. So here is an example. Create another data set with 100 data rows, including height, weight, gender, group, and then finally, diagnosis of heart disease, like a binary class, right? And I put some constraints. I said, look, height and weight should be somewhat positively correlated. Weight and presence of heart disease should have 0.7 correlation, and the correlations between males in the presence of heart disease should be higher than the correlation of heart disease and females, meaning men are more susceptible to heart disease, right? So these are some intuitive ideas that I have about, let's say I'm in a medical field and I want to learn data analytics, but then I want to create my own synthetic data set, right? And that's what I do. And let's see what ChatGPT does with this specific synthetic generation of data, right? So here it is. So it says creating a data set with a specific correlation requirements can be a bit challenging, which is which is true, of course, right? But here is an example of how it was able to go and create these data sets, right? So you can see some interesting ideas here. If you so like and inclined, it will only take you a minute. You can copy all this code right here, and you can select all of that, and you can run it. And now that you ran it, and if you remember, summary of the data, where is my data? Let's see. Uh, let's use this summary right here. Oh, here it is. Plots. So you can create something for gender. Uh, let's see. So you can actually create synthetic data here. I've actually checked this out, and some of it is actually pretty good. Variable for group. Okay, yeah, so it hasn't created all the variables yet. So it's creating you all that stuff. And then the diagnosis. So column by column by column, it is actually creating all this. And if you take all this and assign it to this, and then you can do the modifications based on the correlations. It does all of this wonderful stuff, right? So you can now take all this here, okay? And you can go ahead and run this. And it created all this under my data. And now, hopefully, you've learned something about how to look for summaries because you already went through this before, and we'll see what the summary of the data looks like, right? So here it is. It actually created something for you, right? So this way, you can actually create synthetic data. The more complicated, so I've done this in cluster analysis for market segmentation. It can get quite complicated, by the way. Okay, so something to keep in mind.
Is it acceptable in the research as a second data validation of the hypothesis?
Yes, but the caveat is the following. Number one, creating a data set that is really research ready, so to speak, is somewhat challenging if you're creating it synthetically, because you have to put in various constraints, right? You have to put, you have to see what it does. But if you're trying to demonstrate a technique, so let's say you come up with a new technique of clustering, right? So I'm working on one simple example in my research now, but let's take one simple example. So let's say you have a new clustering algorithm or a specific technique. To demonstrate its efficacy, you create a synthetic data of which you already know the answer, and then see how well your technique will perform against that one. But in the research report, I think you'll have to disclose the fact that it's a synthetic data. Here are the assumptions and constraints of how you created that, and the tool that helped you create it, and then the validations you performed after it created that one. So on this data set right here, we can actually find the correlation matrix of this particular data set, right? So let me see if I can even remember my command here. And I can do this. Let's see if it'll work. If it doesn't, I'll have to go back and, oh, I really don't know. Okay, so please create a correlation. Please create a what is the spelling of correlation? Correlation matrix. Okay, and let's see a correlation matrix here. If it is creating that, and the point is that when you create a correlation matrix, you can go back and validate and say, have my constraints about the data been actually validated or not? Right? So you can look at that, you can look at the plots, you can say, yeah, that's what I wanted. I wanted a normal plot of, height and weight. Did I get it or not? Is height and weight more or less positively correlated or not, right? So you can actually test this out. Now, this one is a bit slow right now, but you get the general idea. When it comes up, I'll show it to you real quick.
There is a question from Rahul Kumar how generative AI can be changing the construction industry, considering the complexity associated with the projects. So maybe he's using some software, perhaps coding, and he is asking that question whether, in short, how it will be useful in construction industry.
Yeah, I can speculate. Obviously, I'm not a construction engineer and I wouldn't know, but I can speculate about this one, right? So, in here is how I think the whole ChatGPT and LLM market is going to shape up as we go forward. Currently, the way it is right now, ChatGPT is a general purpose tool for taking, knowledge of all kinds. I can, in the same session, I can ask it about music or something else, right? I can do that. Now, what will happen, I think, is that people will say, can I take ChatGPT type of the foundational capability of understanding language, but specialize it with specific industries, the finance industry, the construction industry, the medical industry, and pharmaceuticals, and et cetera, et cetera. Then it becomes a much more targeted. So once you get into any engineering discipline, how do you do, stress analysis of, load analysis of buildings, and how do you do that stuff? How do you get the correct mix ratio for, creating mortar cement, for example? I'm just making these examples. So what tools do you use in finite element analysis, for example, right, in engineering? And how do you interpret the results of finite element analysis, right? So all of these simple little things you can actually use now ChatGPT as an adjunct. It is not going to replace your CAD CAM types of software. It's not going to do that, right? Or surface modeling techniques. It's not going to do that. But it's there as an adjunct, and you can learn, and you can use it in conjunction with it. That's how I think it's going to change.
And can you just take a follow-on question, how it will impact project management? Because I think that will be a
Uh,
common theme both in software and construction.
Yeah, yeah. So for project management, again, project management is one of those horizontal capabilities, right? It doesn't depend. It doesn't necessarily the concept of project management doesn't change just because you change your field or industry. You still manage people. You still manage all these things, right? The Right now, I do not believe there are specialized tool addendums or plugins with ChatGPT for managing projects, right? But think about it like this one. Suppose I was creating a Gantt chart of a project steps, and I find it's tough for me to allocate resources and we can't get something done. Can ChatGPT ingest that data as a CSV, and can it help you figure out the critical path, for example, within your project? Can it do critical path analysis? Can it do dependency diagrams for you? Can it say, if I put more people on this task, how much faster than can I get this achieved? Can it answer simple questions like that? Sometimes the project management tools will do that for you, but sometimes they don't. Where ChatGPT can maybe help is in change management. So if you have a change management initiative going on, you can use ChatGPT to say, my new project is going to add these capabilities. How do I ensure that the new features will get maximum adoption? Can you suggest some strategies? I challenge you guys, if you have ChatGPT open right now, go ahead and ask the very same question the way I asked it, right? I have a new product coming out and it has new features. How do I ensure that these features get maximum adoption within my business? Ask the question just like that and see what you get. And based on that answer, you can do follow-on digging. You can dig more through that.
Okay. So I think we are running late, but I will take 2, 3 minutes. I will take two questions which are very important. Question from Asi. What career to choose after IT engineering that I have less coding? And I think he is now saying I can have any engineering coding. The way you have explained is lowering. So obviously he's saying now dual combo will work. So your expert views, because it's a very interesting question now.
What career to choose after IT engineering that have less coding? Oh boy. Asif, it depends on your specific interest and ambition. You have two or three open paths for you, right? One path is, you know, if you want to pursue deep into your own industry and engineering, you have a whole bunch of tools and things that you can do, right? So that's number one. The second thing that you could do is go more into management, engineering management. That's another career path that you have that has, very little coding whatsoever. So so it depends on your ambition where you want to go, because each of these paths have very specific things, specific actions you can take to become really good at it, right? Anyone here has, this type of question, which will take up, we need to get into a little bit depth into what you really want, right? So my best advice for you is to get back with Professor Milind here, and other people, other professors that you have access to, and sit down with a guidance, with a counseling session, and see what would be great. Okay.
So there is one more question. Can I get placed in AI by pursuing a degree in BBA? These are coming because the way you have shown the pathway of learning. Okay.
And what is BBA?
This is the
Imagine?
Bachelor of, Management types or arts, whatever. It's an
Oh, yes,
undergrad.
yes, yes. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Terrific. Great question. I love it. So, so one of the things that you can do now with AI, some of the barriers that you had to use adopting AI from that sort of a background, they have been removed, because AI is like your assistant that takes care of a lot of the technical details and helps you with it, right? So you can now start using AI for, whether it is to create PowerPoints or to create, summaries, or to read articles. There are plugins where you can read articles. There is a plugin that says ask PDF. So you can ingest PDF documents and ask it to summarize things for you. You can use the data analytic tools just like this, any form of fashion. So can you work in AI doing this? Yes. The whole concept of an AI career initially in the previous years was the following. You had to be very good in mathematics. You had to be a fantastic super duper coder. You had to know about algorithms and computer science, right? That was what AI was. You wanted a career in AI, that's what you had to have. Now, people are getting into no, we want to use AI effectively. How do you write prompts to a chat GPT to get the right type of information out of it? And that is a skill that is outside the traditional framework of programming and mathematics and stuff like that, right? So the usage of AI has gone way beyond, and the skills that you need to use AI effectively are not just simply learn math and computer science and all this other stuff. There is still a place for that, but now it's expanded beyond that. That's what I'm trying to say.
So I think I will take a last question, which perhaps looking at our young participants today. Can ChatGPT and generative AI will be useful in preparing the standardized tests like GMAT? Your expert opinion.
Do you mean can we use ChatGPT to learn how to answer those GMAT types of questions?
GMAT type of thing, preparations, how to do what.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So you are,
So
because that
what
is
you
what I mean, thread is coming. That if learning this is possible, then why not that?
let me give you a sort of give everyone who is interested in this type of question a sort of a homework for you, right? So because I have to give you, I'm a professor to give you homework. Take up a GMAT or a GRE or one of those books, right? You already have them. You're preparing for it. Maybe you're doing this stuff or any such exam. IAS doesn't matter, right? You take the question and there's an answer to this one, right? And maybe the book doesn't do a thorough job of answering that question, but you take that same question and put it in chat gpt as a prompt, and you see what comes up. And inside the answer you'll have other things that you don't understand, and you can continue to question. So yes, can you use it to prepare? Of course you can. You'll be amazed at how well you can actually use chat gpt to prepare for these types of exams.
So one request from our participants, can we have a follow-on webinar with you on preparations on this competitive world, looking at the way you have shown a pathway. So if you
All
are okay, I
right,
will schedule.
certainly.
Okay.
Certainly,
Then,
certainly.
because since we are running out of time, very interesting. Zatin, he wants to speak, but either Dipali or Nusrat. Is it possible to unmute so that he can speak and put up question?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So Jatin Kumar. Can you unmute him so that he can put a question? We are already 5 minutes late, but I'm allowing one question from the audience. Jatin?
Yes, sir. 1 minute.
Yeah.
Jatin, you can
Good
ask your
evening, sir.
question. Yeah.
Jatin, you are able to speak?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, just I read today in the Hindu newspaper as OpenAI has threats of getting copyright infringement, like from huge journal houses. So, if everyone going to do these kind of things, then what we can infer from it in the future of OpenAI or ChatGPT?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll give you a short answer.
And uh,
Um,
sorry, sir, just one more question. Like if our learning models will get synthetic data and use these synthetic data to create new models, maybe can it be disastrous for us in near future or upcoming future? Then thank you.
okay.
In
No,
advance.
certainly. Yeah, no, certainly. Copyright infringement. Certainly it is a concern, but I'll give you this is my personal opinion, nothing to do with USF or this institution. My personal opinion is that the genie is out of the box already. Okay, trying to put it back in is not going to work, whether we like it or not. All of the content about it's already available publicly. All you needed is an internet connection, and you go there and you look at all the articles and all the websites out there, and some of it is you have to log in. I get it, right? But everything else is that is open is going to be open, right? If ChatGPT, if OpenAI people went to all the publicly open and use that information to create this one, it is somewhat debatable and say, this is what a person would have done. Hello. I could have gone to all of this if I had the time and energy and the power. I could have gone to all of these hundreds of millions of websites and learned all this stuff up and memorized its stuff, and I would be just as good as ChatGPT, right? So, am I infringing my copyright if I now create a business consulting business and I use all my knowledge to make money from somebody? I don't know. So, it's highly debatable. So, I personally don't think there's a lot of merit to that one. If ChatGPT went after copyrighted information that was under lock and key, then that could be a problem, right? So, broad general stuff like this one, I can't speak to the legality of this one, but I'm very skeptical. Even if they won that argument and litigated successfully, what can we even do to change that? You can't, because even as we speak, there are open source initiatives going on where people are taking all the information that you could ever believe in and doing the same thing all over again. How many people are you going to go and litigate now, right? Some are in other countries, some are in Russia and China. They're doing this stuff whether you like it or not, right? I don't know. So, I mean, I really have my doubts about that one. And the
Right.
last piece was,
Go ahead.
sorry, what was the second part of the question?
Jatin, second part of your question. Jatin?
Jatin, you can ask your question, please.
The second part of your question, I
Yes.
forgot.
So, like if our data models will learn from their own synthetic data,
I got you. I
so
got
it
you. I
would be
got you.
the disastrous in upcoming time.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. It would be disastrous except for the following fact, right? If you use a synthetic data to create your own models, you'll have to deploy those models some way. Now, if I don't mean you personally, but if somebody is a bad actor, right? They generate data that has ethnic things within that. It is discriminatory type of synthetic data. They use the data to do other bad things. No one can prevent that. Can you prevent it? No, we can't, right? It's happening. Forget AI. It's happening right now. Okay, even before AI, it's been happening. So there's nothing you can do about it, right? But for responsible companies, one of the things everyone should be doing, and I think they will, including research institutions and academic institutions, they will say, where was this data generated from, right? Does it violate any of the discriminatory practices? Is there bias built into this one? There are tools right now coming up trying to tools to detect bias within data sets, right? So there'll be increased usage of these particular tools. And in some cases, these tools will match up the bias against something that is prohibited legally. So for example, you cannot deny loans based on ethnicity, right? So if your model has ethnicity as part of your data set, one of the columns, the bias tools will say, you can't do that, right? And so there are some ways around it.
Okay, I think we have exceeded the time. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Kiran for taking the time out, talking to our participants, taking the questions, patiently answering them. So thank you, Professor Kiran. We'll love to have you back, as the audience is texting me many things that you need to have back with preparation for this test. It is your choice. If you want, I would like to have a follow-on seminar with you. Maybe you can use your two tools like that. I would like to thank all the participants for posting the questions, giving in advance, interacting, because every time we have very interesting question and it happens learning as well. And thank you to the moderators and organizations, organizers, back office. So it was wonderful conversation. Thank you again. Thank you and have a great day. Thank you.